The morning fog clung to the towering pines of Olympic National Forest like a shroud, creating an otherworldly atmosphere that seemed perfect for the psychological thriller, Echoes in the Dark. Director Sophia Mitchell adjusted her headset as she watched the crew set up equipment for what would become the most crucial scene of the film. The remote location, 3 hours from Seattle, had been chosen specifically for its isolation and haunting beauty. None of them could have predicted that this very isolation would soon become their nightmare. Before we continue, let us know where you're watching from. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel by clicking the icon in the bottom right corner of your screen. Now, let's get into the story. Aiden Thompson stood near the craft services table, going over his lines one final time. At 28, he had already established himself as one of Hollywood's most promising young actors, with 2 critically acclaimed independent films under his belt. This project was supposed to be his breakthrough into mainstream cinema. His character, a troubled detective haunted by his past, was complex and demanding, requiring intense emotional preparation. Aiden had been staying in character for weeks, much to the concern of his co-star Emily Roberts, who had noticed his increasingly withdrawn behavior. "You ready for this scene, Aiden?" Emily approached him with a steaming cup of coffee, her breath visible in the cold morning air. The 24-year-old actress had been working closely with Aiden throughout the production, and she couldn't shake the feeling that something was troubling him beyond the demands of the role. Aiden looked up from his script, his green eyes reflecting the gray morning light. "Yeah, I think so. This confrontation scene is crucial for the character's arc. I just want to make sure I get it right." He paused, glancing toward the dense forest that stretched endlessly in all directions. "There's something about this place that gets under your skin, you know. Perfect for what we're trying to achieve." Producer Daniel Parker was busy coordinating with the cinematographer when he noticed the weather forecast on his phone. A storm system was moving in faster than expected, and they had a narrow window to capture the outdoor scenes. The pressure was mounting as the production was already behind schedule and over budget. Every day counted, and losing time to weather would be catastrophic for the independent film's tight finances. "We need to move fast today," Daniel announced to the crew. "Weather's coming in, and we've got maybe 4 hours of good light before the rain hits." The crew responded with practiced efficiency, adjusting cameras and lighting equipment while the actors prepared for their scenes. The scene they were filming involved Aiden's character discovering crucial evidence in a remote cabin, followed by a chase sequence through the forest. The location scouts had found the perfect abandoned structure deep in the woods, about a mile from their base camp. The cabin, weathered and overgrown with moss, looked like it had been forgotten by time itself. Local rangers had given them permission to film there, warning them about the challenging terrain and the importance of staying on marked trails. Sophia gathered the core crew for a final briefing. "Remember, we're working with natural light today, so we need to nail these takes. The cabin location is remote, but that's exactly what we need for the authenticity of the scene. Safety first, everyone. Stay with your designated groups, and nobody ventures off alone." As the crew made their way through the forest trail, the morning mist began to lift, revealing the true majesty of the ancient trees surrounding them. The sound of their footsteps was muffled by decades of fallen leaves and pine needles. Aiden walked alongside Emily, both of them carrying their costume changes in weatherproof bags. The actor seemed more relaxed now, energized by the prospect of filming in such a unique environment. "I grew up in places like this," Aiden mentioned as they navigated a particularly steep section of the trail. "My family used to go camping in the Cascade Mountains every summer. There's something about the silence out here that's both peaceful and unsettling." Emily nodded, though she was originally from Chicago and found the dense forest somewhat intimidating. The city girl in her preferred concrete and streetlights to endless trees and shadows. The cabin appeared through the trees like something from a fairy tale gone wrong. Its wooden walls were dark with age and moisture, and several windows were boarded up. Wild blackberry vines had claimed much of the structure, creating an almost impenetrable barrier around the foundation. The art department had done minimal work to the location, wanting to preserve its authentic decay for the film. "Perfect," Sophia breathed as she surveyed the scene. "This is exactly what we need." The contrast between the natural beauty and the underlying menace is perfect for our story. The cinematographer began setting up the first shot while the sound engineer tested the acoustics of the location. The forest seemed to swallow sound, creating an eerie quiet that was broken only by the occasional bird call or rustling of leaves. They filmed several establishing shots and interior scenes throughout the morning. Aiden's performance was particularly intense, drawing from some deep well of emotion that impressed even the seasoned director. The actor seemed to have tapped into something primal and raw, delivering lines with a conviction that sent chills down the spines of the crew members watching the monitors. During a break between setups, Daniel Parker received a call from the studio executives. The conversation was tense, with pressure mounting about the film's completion date and budget overruns. Independent films lived and died by their ability to deliver on time and within budget. And Echoes in the Dark was walking a tightrope. The producer tried to shield the creative team from the financial stress, but the strain was beginning to show. "We need to wrap the forest scenes today," Daniel informed Sophia during a private moment. "The weather window is closing, and we can't afford to come back." The director nodded grimly, understanding the implications. They would have to push harder and longer than originally planned, but the alternative was potentially losing the entire project. As afternoon approached, they prepared for the final and most challenging scene of the day. It involved Aiden's character fleeing from the cabin through the dense forest, a sequence that required multiple camera angles and careful coordination. The actor would need to run through predetermined paths while being filmed from various positions, creating the illusion of a desperate chase through hostile terrain. The first few takes went smoothly. Aiden demonstrated remarkable athleticism, navigating the rough terrain with the skill of someone comfortable in the outdoors. His performance was committed and physical, throwing himself into the role with abandon. Emily watched from the monitors, impressed by his dedication, but also concerned about his safety as he pushed himself harder with each take. "That's a wrap on this angle," Sophia called out after the fourth take. "Let's move to position 2 for the tracking shot." The crew began the process of relocating their equipment to the next filming position, about 200 yards deeper into the forest. This required careful planning as the terrain became increasingly challenging the further they moved from the main trail. Aiden used the setup time to review his blocking for the next sequence. The scene called for him to emerge from a thicket of undergrowth, disoriented and desperate. He studied the terrain carefully, noting potential hazards and planning his movements. The actor's commitment to realism was one of his greatest strengths, but it also led him to take risks that more cautious performers might avoid. As the crew finished setting up for the tracking shot, they realized they needed additional coverage from a third angle to properly capture the sequence. This would require splitting the team, with one group remaining at the current position, while another moved to establish the final camera setup. Time was running short, and the decision was made to work simultaneously rather than sequentially. "Aiden, we need you to wait for the signal before starting the sequence," Sophia instructed through her radio. "Both cameras need to be rolling before you begin the run." The actor acknowledged the instruction, taking his position about 50 yards away from the crew. He was partially concealed by the dense vegetation, visible only as a splash of color against the green and brown forest backdrop. The setup for the final angle took longer than expected. A piece of equipment malfunctioned, requiring troubleshooting and replacement. The afternoon light was beginning to fade, and the promised storm clouds were gathering overhead. Pressure mounted as the crew worked frantically to complete the necessary preparations. "How much longer?" Daniel asked the camera operator, anxiety evident in his voice. The producer was acutely aware that they were pushing against multiple deadlines, and every minute lost could have serious consequences for the production. "5 more minutes," came the reply. "We're almost ready." During this delay, Aiden remained in position, staying in character and maintaining the emotional intensity required for the scene. Method acting was his approach, and he often remained in character between takes to preserve the psychological state necessary for his performance. The forest around him was quiet except for the distant sounds of the crew working. As the minutes ticked by, the crew finally completed their setup. "Ready on camera 1," came the call over the radio. "Ready on camera 2," followed shortly after. Sophia prepared to give the signal for Aiden to begin the sequence. "Aiden, we're ready when you are," she called out, her voice carrying clearly through the forest air. There was no response. "Aiden?" she called again, louder this time. The forest seemed to absorb her voice, leaving only silence in its wake. Emily felt the first flutter of concern. "Maybe he didn't hear you," she suggested, though something in her expression suggested she wasn't entirely convinced by her own words. Sophia tried the radio, thinking perhaps the actor had moved out of voice range. "Aiden, this is Sophia. Do you copy?" Static filled the airwaves, but there was no response from the actor. A cold knot began to form in the director's stomach as she realized something was wrong. Where exactly was he positioned? Daniel asked, his producer's mind already shifting into crisis management mode. The crew began to gather, their earlier efficiency replaced by growing concern. The forest that had seemed so perfect for their thriller was beginning to feel genuinely threatening. 2 crew members jogged toward Aiden's last known position, calling his name as they went. Their voices echoed strangely among the trees, seeming to come from all directions at once. When they reached the spot where the actor had been waiting, they found only disturbed leaves and broken branches where he had been standing. "He's not here," one of them called back to the main group. "It looks like he moved, but I can't tell which direction." The search began immediately, with crew members fanning out in all directions from Aiden's last known position. They called his name repeatedly, their voices growing more urgent with each passing minute. The forest seemed to swallow their calls, offering no response except the whisper of wind through the trees. As the first drops of rain began to fall, the realization hit them all at once. Aiden Thompson, their lead actor and the heart of their film, had vanished without a trace in the depths of Olympic National Forest. The thriller they had been creating was about to become a real-life mystery that would haunt everyone involved for years to come. Chapter 2. The search intensifies. The rain that had been threatening all day finally arrived with a vengeance, turning the forest floor into a treacherous maze of slippery leaves and hidden obstacles. Sophia Mitchell stood at the center of what had quickly become a command post, her director's headset now serving as a lifeline for coordinating the search efforts. The transformation from film set to rescue operation had happened with frightening speed, and she found herself making decisions that no film school had prepared her for. "We need to establish a perimeter," Daniel Parker announced, his producer's organizational skills kicking into high gear. "Everyone needs to stay within shouting distance of each other. The last thing we need is more people getting lost." The crew had instinctively formed small groups, nobody wanting to venture alone into the increasingly dark forest. Emily Roberts sat on an equipment case, her costume partially soaked from the rain, staring at the spot where Aiden had last been seen. "He wouldn't just wander off," she insisted for the 3rd time. "He was completely focused on the scene. Something must have happened." Her voice carried a mixture of concern and frustration that resonated with everyone present. The first call to 911 had been made within 30 minutes of Aiden's disappearance. The operator had been professional but firm about the response time, explaining that the remote location would delay the arrival of search and rescue teams. Olympic National Forest covered over 900,000 acres, and coordinating a search in such terrain required specialized equipment and personnel. "Search and rescue is en route," Daniel announced after finishing his call with the authorities. "ETA is approximately 90 minutes. They're bringing dogs and thermal imaging equipment." The mention of dogs sparked a mix of hope and dread among the crew. Everyone understood that trained search dogs could cover ground much faster than humans, but their deployment also signaled the seriousness of the situation. While they waited for professional help, the crew organized their own search efforts. The cinematographer, who had extensive experience filming in remote locations, took charge of establishing search patterns. "We need to be systematic," he explained. "Random searching is inefficient and dangerous. We'll work in pairs, covering predetermined areas and reporting back every 15 minutes. The forest that had seemed so beautiful and atmospheric just hours earlier now felt menacing and hostile. The rain had intensified, creating a constant drumming on the canopy above that made communication difficult. Visibility was dropping as the storm clouds blocked what little afternoon light remained. Every shadow seemed to hide potential dangers, and every sound could be interpreted as either hope or threat. Emily partnered with the sound engineer for the first search sweep. They moved slowly through the underbrush, calling Aiden's name and listening carefully for any response. The acoustic properties of the forest were strange, with sounds seeming to come from unexpected directions and distances. More than once, they thought they heard a response, only to realize it was an echo of their own voices or the call of another search team. "Over here." The shout came from the direction of the abandoned cabin, causing everyone to freeze and listen intently. One of the lighting technicians had found something near the structure's rear wall. The entire group converged on the location, hope and fear warring in their expressions. What they found was Aiden's jacket, hanging from a low branch about 20 feet behind the cabin. The garment was positioned in a way that suggested it had been deliberately placed rather than accidentally snagged. The discovery sent a chill through the group that had nothing to do with the rain and dropping temperature. "Why would he take off his jacket?" Emily asked, voicing the question that was on everyone's mind. The temperature was dropping, and the rain was getting heavier. Removing a jacket in these conditions made no sense, unless something had compelled him to do so. Sophia carefully examined the jacket without disturbing it, knowing that it would be important evidence for the search teams. "His phone and wallet are still in the pockets," she reported. "Keys too." The presence of his personal items ruled out the possibility that he had simply decided to leave on his own. The discovery of the jacket expanded the search area significantly. If Aiden had been at the cabin after his disappearance, he could have moved in any direction from that point. The terrain around the abandoned structure was particularly challenging, with steep slopes and dense vegetation that could easily conceal a person or hide potential hazards. As the search continued, more disturbing details emerged. The ground around the cabin showed signs of disturbance, with broken branches and scuffed earth that suggested some kind of struggle or rapid movement. However, the rain was quickly washing away any tracks or other evidence that might have provided clues about what had happened. "I found something else," called out the script supervisor, who had been searching near a small creek that ran behind the cabin. The group gathered around her as she pointed to a series of marks in the mud near the water's edge. The impressions were partially filled with rainwater, but they appeared to be footprints leading away from the cabin and into the dense forest beyond. The footprints were consistent with Aiden's hiking boots, but they were spaced oddly, as if he had been moving erratically or in a hurry. The trail led toward a particularly dense section of forest where the canopy was so thick that little light penetrated even during the day. Following the prints would require careful navigation through terrain that was becoming increasingly dangerous as the storm intensified. "We should wait for the professionals," Daniel insisted, though his voice lacked conviction. Every instinct told him that time was critical, but he also understood the responsibility he bore for the safety of his entire crew. The decision to continue searching or wait for help was an impossible choice with potentially devastating consequences either way. The sound of approaching helicopters provided a temporary reprieve from the decision. The search and rescue team was arriving earlier than expected, their aircraft equipped with powerful searchlights that cut through the gloom like beacons of hope. The crew gathered in the small clearing they had been using as a base camp, relief evident on their faces. Samuel Hayes, the lead investigator for the Olympic County Sheriff's Department, emerged from the first helicopter with the confidence of someone who had handled countless similar situations. At 51, he had been working search and rescue cases for over 20 years, and his experience was immediately apparent in the way he assessed the situation and began organizing the professional search effort. "I need to speak with whoever was in charge of the film crew," Detective Hayes announced. Sophia stepped forward, still wearing her director's headset, her face a mask of controlled anxiety. "I'm Sophia Mitchell, the director. This is Daniel Parker, our producer. Tell me exactly what happened," Hayes requested, pulling out a waterproof notepad. "Start from the beginning and don't leave out any details, no matter how insignificant they might seem." His tone was professional but not unsympathetic, and both filmmakers found themselves responding to his calm authority. As Sophia recounted the events leading up to Aiden's disappearance, Hayes took detailed notes and asked pointed questions. His experience had taught him that the first few hours of a missing person case were crucial, and that seemingly minor details often provided the key to understanding what had happened. "You said he was method acting?" Hayes inquired. "Can you explain what that means in practical terms?" The question revealed his understanding that Hollywood terminology might not translate directly to real-world situations. "He stays in character between takes," Emily explained. "He's been doing it throughout the production. It helps him maintain the emotional intensity required for the role." She paused, then added, "He's been more withdrawn lately, but we all assumed it was just the demands of the character." Hayes nodded, filing the information away for later analysis. "What about his personal life? Any problems at home? Financial issues? Relationship troubles?" The questions were standard for missing person cases, but they felt intrusive when applied to someone the crew knew personally. "Nothing that we know of," Daniel replied. "He's been professional throughout the production. No complaints, no conflicts with other cast members or crew." The producer's business mind was already calculating the implications of the situation, though he tried to keep such thoughts to himself. The professional search teams deployed with military precision, using thermal imaging equipment and trained search dogs to cover ground that would have taken the film crew hours to traverse. The dogs immediately showed interest in the area around the cabin, confirming that Aiden had indeed been there after his initial disappearance. As night fell, the search took on a more urgent quality. The temperature was dropping steadily, and the rain showed no signs of letting up. Without his jacket and possibly injured, Aiden's chances of surviving the night in the forest were diminishing with each passing hour. "We'll continue searching through the night," Hayes assured the crew. "We have night vision equipment and thermal imaging that can detect body heat even in these conditions." His words were meant to be reassuring, but they also carried the unspoken implication that they might be looking for someone who was no longer able to help himself. The film crew was eventually convinced to return to their hotel in the nearby town of Forks, though several members insisted on remaining at the search site. Emily was among those who refused to leave, setting up a vigil near the command post that had been established in the clearing. Her dedication to finding her missing co-star was both admirable and heartbreaking. As the search entered its second day, the focus shifted from rescue to recovery. The harsh reality of wilderness survival meant that every hour without shelter and warmth significantly reduced the chances of finding Aiden alive. The media had gotten wind of the story, and reporters were beginning to arrive, adding another layer of complexity to an already difficult situation. "We're not giving up," Hayes assured the gathered crew members during a morning briefing. "We've had people survive much longer in conditions like these, but I need everyone to understand that this is a marathon, not a sprint. We'll find him, but it may take time." The search continued for 5 more days, with teams covering over 100 square miles of forest. Helicopters with thermal imaging flew grid patterns over the canopy, while ground teams with dogs followed every possible trail. The abandoned cabin became the center of an expanding circle of investigation, but despite the intensive effort, no additional trace of Aiden Thompson was found. Chapter 3. 5 years later, the truth emerges. Detective Samuel Hayes had seen his share of missing person cases throughout his career, but the disappearance of Aiden Thompson was proving to be one of the most perplexing. As the search entered its second week, the focus began to shift from rescue operations to a full-scale investigation. The Olympic County Sheriff's Department had taken over the case, and Hayes found himself digging deeper into the actor's life. looking for clues that might explain what had happened in those crucial moments in the forest. The film crew had been interviewed extensively, with each member providing their account of the events leading up to Aiden's disappearance. What emerged was a picture of a dedicated actor who had been fully committed to his role, perhaps too committed. Several crew members mentioned his increasingly method approach to the character, and how he had seemed to retreat into himself as the production progressed. "He was different the last few weeks," Emily Roberts told Hayes during her third interview. "Not in a bad way, just more intense. He would stay in character even during lunch breaks, and he'd been asking a lot of questions about the psychology of his character." She paused, wrapping her hands around her coffee cup. "I thought it was just professional dedication, but now I'm wondering if it was something more." Hayes had requested all of Aiden's personal effects from his hotel room, and the items painted a picture of someone who had been deeply immersed in his work. The actor's notes were extensive, filled with character analysis and psychological observations that went far beyond what would normally be expected for a film role. Several pages contained what appeared to be stream of consciousness writing, as if Aiden had been exploring his character's mindset in real time. The detective's investigation took him to Los Angeles, where he interviewed Aiden's agent, friends, and family members. What he discovered was a young man who had been struggling with the pressure of his rising career and the demands of the roles he was taking on. His last film, a psychological drama about war veterans, had required him to spend months researching PTSD and trauma responses. "He was a sponge," explained his agent, Margaret Chun. "He absorbed everything about his characters, sometimes to an unhealthy degree. I'd been encouraging him to take a break between projects, but he was so passionate about this forest film. He said it was going to be his breakthrough role." The investigation also revealed that Aiden had been seeing a therapist in Los Angeles, Dr. Patricia Westbrook, who specialized in helping actors deal with the psychological demands of their profession. With the family's permission, Hayes was able to speak with Dr. Westbrook about Aiden's mental state leading up to the filming. He was struggling with the blurred lines between his personal identity and his characters. Dr. Westbrook explained, careful to maintain appropriate confidentiality while still providing helpful information. "It's not uncommon for method actors, but Aiden was particularly susceptible to this kind of psychological absorption. We had been working on techniques to help him maintain boundaries." As weeks turned into months, the case began to attract national attention. The story of a rising Hollywood star who had vanished in the wilderness captured the public imagination, spawning countless theories and amateur investigations. The media attention was both helpful and harmful, keeping the case in the public eye while creating pressure for quick answers. The film production had been suspended indefinitely, with the incomplete footage locked away as potential evidence. Daniel Parker worked tirelessly with insurance companies and investors to minimize the financial damage, but the loss of their lead actor had effectively killed the project. The crew members gradually returned to their lives and other projects, though many remained haunted by the experience. Emily Roberts found it particularly difficult to move on. She had been close to Aiden during the production, and his disappearance left her with a profound sense of unfinished business. She remained in contact with Detective Hayes, often calling with new theories or remembered details that might be relevant to the case. Years passed, and the case gradually faded from public attention. Hayes had officially retired from the sheriff's department, though he continued to think about the Thompson case regularly. The forest had kept its secrets, and despite countless hours of investigation, the truth remained elusive. Then, in the spring of 2023, exactly 5 years after Aiden's disappearance, a group of experienced hikers made a discovery that would finally provide answers to the mystery that had haunted so many lives. The hikers were exploring a remote section of the forest, several miles from where the original search had been conducted. They were following an old deer trail when they noticed something unusual, partially hidden beneath a fallen log. What they found was a weathered backpack, its contents remarkably well preserved, despite years of exposure to the elements. Inside the backpack were items that immediately caught the attention of the authorities when the hikers reported their discovery. There was a journal written in what appeared to be Aiden's handwriting, along with several personal items that had not been accounted for during the original investigation. The journal would prove to be the key to understanding what had happened during those final days. Hayes, though retired, was called in to examine the evidence. As he read through the journal entries, a disturbing picture began to emerge. The entries, dated from the days following Aiden's disappearance, revealed a man who had become completely lost in his character, unable to distinguish between his own identity and the troubled detective he had been portraying. Day 3 in the forest, read one entry. The boundaries are gone. I can't tell where Detective Marcus ends and I begin. The trees are speaking to me, telling me about the cases that were never solved, the victims who never found justice. I need to stay here. I need to finish what he started. The journal entries became increasingly erratic and disconnected from reality. Aiden had apparently constructed an elaborate fantasy in which he was actually the character he had been playing, and the forest had become the setting for imaginary investigations and confrontations with fictional criminals. The method acting technique that had made him so successful as an actor had ultimately consumed his sense of self. I found the evidence today, another entry read, hidden in the old cabin, just like I knew it would be. The case can finally be closed, but they're watching me now. I can feel them in the shadows. I have to keep moving, have to stay ahead of them. The final entries in the journal, dated nearly 2 weeks after his disappearance, were barely legible. They spoke of being followed, of hidden enemies, and of a growing conviction that he could never return to his old life. The last entry was particularly heartbreaking. I'm not Aiden anymore. I haven't been for a long time. Maybe I never was. The forest knows who I really am. Based on the location where the backpack was found and the condition of the items inside, investigators were able to piece together Aiden's final days. He had apparently survived in the wilderness for at least 2 weeks, driven by delusions and unable to distinguish between reality and the character he had been portraying. The harsh conditions of the forest, combined with his deteriorating mental state, had ultimately claimed his life. A thorough search of the area around the backpack discovery site revealed additional evidence, including clothing and personal items that confirmed the tragic conclusion. Aiden Thompson had indeed died in the Olympic National Forest, not from any external threat, but from the psychological demons that had consumed him during his final days. The revelation brought closure to his family, friends, and the film crew who had never stopped wondering about his fate. Emily Roberts, who had remained haunted by the disappearance, found herself both heartbroken and relieved to finally know the truth. He was such a talented actor, she said during a memorial service held in his honor. His gift was his ability to truly become the characters he played. In the end, that same gift became his tragedy. But I hope people remember him for the joy he brought to his work and the passion he had for his craft. The case of Aiden Thompson became a cautionary tale within the entertainment industry about the psychological risks of method acting and the importance of maintaining clear boundaries between performance and reality. Several acting schools and therapy programs began, incorporating his story as a way to educate young actors about the potential dangers of losing oneself in a character. Detective Hayes, reflecting on the case years later, often thought about the fine line between dedication and obsession. Aiden was someone who gave everything to his art, he said. Unfortunately, in this case, that meant giving everything, including his life. It's a reminder that we all need anchors to keep us grounded in reality, no matter how compelling our fantasies might be. The Olympic National Forest, with its towering trees and hidden depths, continues to attract filmmakers and outdoor enthusiasts from around the world. But for those who knew Aiden Thompson, it will always be remembered as the place where a young man's dreams and nightmares became indistinguishable, and where the ultimate price was paid for the pursuit of artistic truth. The story of Aiden Thompson serves as a powerful reminder of the importance of maintaining our connection to reality, even when pursuing our deepest passions. His tragedy teaches us that while dedication to our craft is admirable, we must never lose sight of who we are beneath the roles we play. In remembering Aiden, we honor not just his talent, but also the importance of staying grounded in the love and support of our communities, our families, and our faith. The forest may have claimed his life, but his story continues to serve as a beacon of warning and wisdom for others who walk the sometimes dangerous path between reality and performance. In the end, Aiden Thompson's greatest role may be the one he never intended to play, a teacher whose tragic lesson could save others from a similar fate. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more mysterious cases and compelling stories. Your support helps us continue bringing you the content you love. Until next time, remember to cherish the people in your life and never take for granted the simple gift of knowing who you are.